What's going on, growers? It's James Piccioni coming to you live from Jersey. Today, I want to share with you my 5 secret tips for growing bigger, better squash. Let's go! Let's jump into the first tip that has to do with saving our summer squash after the vine borers have attacked them. So the squash vine borer is going to be one of the biggest issues that you're probably going to have when it comes to growing your squash, your summer squash especially. So this issue, it's kind of hard to prevent. There are some things we can do to prevent it that I'll share a little bit later. But if you're like me and you already have this issue, which is common at this time of the year, I think a lot of you probably do have this problem, where the squash vine borer has bored into the stem. What happens is they lay eggs around the plant, then the young larvae go into the stem, they bore into it, they eat away at the stem, and they eat away into the stem, which blocks the flow of water. Without the flow of water, this plant really can't get any water and survive and thrive. So what I like to do, one of my little tricks, is once I see this first starting to happen early, if I can't prevent it, then what I do is I move further down the vine, you'll notice right here, and I bury the vine further down the stem. What this does is it forces it to root into the ground. So essentially I'm switching from the roots coming from the, all the way at the back of the vine to the middle here. So that squash vine borer is working in there, preventing the water from moving from the ground through the plant, but it's not gonna be an issue when I root it down here. So I'm gonna just pull back these a little bit just to show you, because it's probably started to root into the ground. You'll notice as I'm starting to move this that we'll start to see some roots, like right here, if you can see. They're starting to root into the ground already. I don't want to move it too much to disturb it, but this is how I like to save this plant right here. And it really thrives once it roots into the ground. I like to do this again once I start seeing the issues from the squash vine borer. And then this increases my production and the length of time that this plant will actually produce, increasing my overall harvest. And right here is another location where I have a summer squash where I just buried the stem, allowing that to root into the ground, because the vine borers have bored into the stem at the base. And after it's rooted into the ground like this, what you can do is you can go into the base of your zucchini, and you could actually cut out the larvae that's inside of it, because the larvae is probably still inside of there, blocking some of the water from moving through and eating some of the stem on the inside. So you can cut it out and remove the larvae. The only issue is that it really damages the plant, and you could have a whole plant loss if you don't do something like I did, where you root it before. So if you want to root it ahead like this, and now it's rooted, I can go back and remove the larvae that's further closer to the base of the plant. My second tip to ensure a better summer squash harvest is to avoid the vine borers. The way we do this is by staggering our plantings. So if we plant a second round of squash in July, then these will be mature by the time that the vine borers have essentially stopped laying their eggs. So we'll basically miss those bugs just by timing. The squash vine borers won't attack these plants because they're planted later, so that's a good way to avoid them. But I like also planting that early round of squash like you've seen, because we want to make sure we're getting that early harvest. So this really ensures that we're going to get a good late harvest too. So if we plant that early round and the vine borers get them, and we haven't buried the stem like I showed, we at least have that second round to ensure ourselves that good harvest, that consistent harvest that should continue to produce up to the frost, as long as we follow some instructions, and an important one that I'll get into later in the video. My third tip for bigger and better squash harvest is to hand pollinate if you're not getting good pollination yourself. One way to look at this is, let me bring you down here. We'll notice right here, these are squash that look like they were going to be good zucchinis right here, but then they didn't get pollinated and they died off. That's what happens. That's why this one looks like this and this one looks bad like that. So what we can do is we can hand pollinate these ourselves in order to ensure a better pollination. The way to do this is you can use a Q-tip or a paintbrush or even the male flower. First, we want to come out in the morning and identify the male flower. The male flower looks like this. It's just got this long, thin stem, and it's much different from the female. So what I'm going to do is take this, I'm going to dip it in. I'm going to get some pollen on it, just like this. Next, I'm going to move over to a female flower right down here. And the female flower is pretty easy to identify because it has that mini little zucchini at the end of it. So then we take the pollen from the male flower and we're just going to put it into the center and pollinate that female flower just like that. So what that's going to do is ensure ourselves a better overall pollination. If we want though, we could just take this male flower like this and kind of peel away some of the leaves and then just put it into the center like this too, if you want. So this is just ensuring ourselves a better pollination overall, which will lead to bigger harvest, because more fruit equals more food basically. The fourth tip to ensure yourself a bigger and better squash harvest has to do with extending your harvest. So this same principle applies for summer squash, cucumbers, and green beans. And this principle is that the more you pick, the more you get. So when it comes to summer squash, cucumbers, or beans, they're all basically relative, and it has to do with getting these fruit when they're young. So summer squash or cucumbers, you can't pick them too young, because they're even better when they taste young. They're sweeter, and overall the fruit usually just tastes even better when it's young. But the only issue you can make is if you allow them to get too big. So as we move up here, like this cucumber here, we don't want our cucumbers getting too large. This is still a good size. But if you start to see cucumbers turning yellow, they're way past. If your squash gets to be too large and the flower starts to fall off the end of the squash, then that's too far past. If we allow these fruits to ripen on the vine and get too far past, that will slow down and the whole entire vine, and that could even cause the vine to quit producing overall. So when it comes to summer squash, when it comes to cucumbers, when it comes to green beans, you got to keep picking. You don't want them to you don't want the vine to quit producing just because it's focusing on the production of just getting the fruit ripened. So look at that. 4 cucumbers on one plant. That could have been the same principle for a summer squash plant too. The fifth tip to ensure a bigger and better squash harvest isn't actually one that I'm using this year, but I have used it in the past and I'm definitely going to be using it next year, and it has to do with using trap crops. So like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to growing our summer squash or any squash, the squash vine borer is a big issue with it. Also the squash bugs. So a good way to actually prevent the bugs from going to your plants that you want to grow is to grow a variety that's more attractive for those bugs. And a great variety is the blue Hubbard squash. Tuck, what are you doing, boy? Digging a hole? This guy's been digging some holes here. Let me just see if he maybe wants a cucumber or something, a fresh little one. Maybe that'll stop him from digging. We've got some small cucumbers over here. Maybe he wants to snack on one. Snap it off for him. If you guys love seeing Tuck in the videos, hit that like button, because we love having him in here. So like I mentioned, a great thing to do is trap crops, and the blue Hubbard squash is a great variety for that, because it's more attractive for a number of insects. So the blue Hubbard squash is more attractive for the squash vine borers and also the squash bugs. So if they have a choice to go for something like your Costata romanesco squash or the blue Hubbard, they're going to go after the blue Hubbard. So we want all those insects to go to that. The blue Hubbard is also good for your cucumbers too, because it attracts the cucumber beetles, which is a big issue with your cucumbers. So this trap crop can actually help a number of different insects and issues. So it's pretty funny. You can just put that one crop into the ground and that'll draw in a lot of your insects, and it's almost like a sacrificial crop. You know I try to leave you with more than I promise, so I have to give you a bonus tip, and my bonus tip has to do with pruning. Don't be afraid to prune your zucchini leaves and plants when they have some disease issues. So if you see a leaf that is dying back or has some form of a disease issue, get that out as soon as possible. Don't be afraid to prune your zucchini, because if one leaf has some kind of fungal issue or disease, that could easily bubble up and get worse and spread to the rest of your plant. So once you see an issue arise, get to it as early as possible. Prune out those leaves pretty close to the stem like I'm doing here, and just get rid of it. This will lead to overall a bigger harvest. Sometimes for new gardeners, it can seem counterproductive and counterintuitive to be removing things from your plants, but overall it actually gives back. So sometimes cutting away the bad things can lead to bigger harvests and better, healthier plants overall. That's today's video, growers. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. I hope these tips allow you to get bigger harvest, better harvest, and allow you to extend that season. That's my goal. I want you to be eating as much food as possible with the least amount of work. So when you put that squash plant in, I want you to extend that harvest, so you know that little work that you put in just produces a lot of food for you. So I wanted to thank Robert Hughes, one of the new channel members. Thanks for being a part of Team Grow. It means a lot to me and Tuck to know that we're creating some value, and that you guys feel that it's enough that you're able to contribute back for what we're creating. So thank you a lot for that. Before you guys go though, make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share with your friends. Don't forget to check out the merch down low. And remember, whenever you're on Amazon, start your shopping with our Amazon affiliate link. Tuck's around here somewhere, probably laying underneath a tree. Actually, he is over there by the hazelnuts in one of his holes. Like it's just getting hot out here this time of year.
is tough for him with the heat, but we make sure we stay hydrated by eating so many cucumbers. We'll catch you guys back real soon. James and Tuck, we